MassDEP was awarded a Wetland Program Development Grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to explore ways to better protect vulnerable wetlands from stormwater pollution. This is the first of 6 presentations designed to help communities identify cost-effective strategies to meet the federal and state stormwater requirements by protecting vulnerable wetlands and using GIS maps as planning tools to manage stormwater. In this segment, we look at what vulnerable wetlands are, why they are important, and how urbanization can impact vulnerable wetlands in a community. Some types of wetlands are visible, and their ability to protect a critical resource for the public is obvious, such as drinking water supplies, where even a small amount of contamination can have serious environmental public impacts. Other wetlands are smaller, less visible, and are more vulnerable than larger ecosystems to degradation and loss because of their size or their location. An article published by the Center for Watershed Protection defines vulnerable wetlands as the smallest streams and wetlands that do not have a permanent surface water connection to a larger water body, yet are still vital parts of the ecosystem. While all wetland types are vulnerable to changes in hydrology and water quality, the vulnerable wetlands defined for this project are considered to be sensitive in that they respond quickly to small changes in hydrology and diminished water quality, and as such are easily lost and degraded to pollutants delivered with stormwater discharges. Headwater streams are one type of vulnerable wetland. They can be as small as seeps or springs, which represent an interface between groundwater and surface flows, or they can be larger intermittent streams with sustained seasonal flows. Degradation of vulnerable wetlands can occur very quickly. It can be caused by changes in pH, dissolved oxygen, temperature, or a host of other stressors. Specific types of headwater streams and other vulnerable wetlands are described in the next few slides. Headwater streams can include spring seeps where groundwater comes to the surface. They are found in old pastures and in fields and forests. The warmer groundwater keeps snow melted around the seep. The plant and animal life found near the spring seep are important winter food sources for local wildlife. Ephemeral streams are also considered headwater streams. They are known as rain-dependent because precipitation is the primary source of flow in these streams. Despite their seasonal or temporary appearance on the landscape, they are critical to the health of river systems. They are hydrologically and biologically connected to downstream waters and provide many of the same functions and values as rivers and larger streams. Intermittent streams may also be vulnerable wetlands. They are one of a continuum of flow regimes that occur in nature. They flow seasonally when the water table is high and typically sustain flows during wet portions of the year. Small wetland depressions, such as vernal pools, may be considered vulnerable wetlands. They are topographically isolated from other surface water bodies, making them inaccessible to predatory aquatic organisms such as fish that are dependent upon streams. As such, they provide critical habitat for breeding amphibians. Lastly, vulnerable wetlands include critical areas as defined by the Massachusetts Wetlands Regulations. They are included as vulnerable wetlands because they are areas that merit special protection or where restoration efforts would be most beneficial. Critical areas include outstanding resource waters, special resource waters, recharge areas for public water supplies, bathing beaches, cold water fisheries, and shellfish growing areas. So why are vulnerable wetlands important? Protecting headwater streams and isolated wetlands is essential to establish and maintain the quality of our water for public consumption and recreation. They retain and transform excess phosphorus and over 50% of the nitrogen inputs to a watershed. The extensive land-water exchanges that typify vulnerable wetlands serve as natural filters to improve water quality in downstream resources. Impacts to vulnerable wetlands can cause serious environmental degradation to larger downstream resources. In addition, degraded waters that do not support designated public uses defined by the Clean Water Act do not meet state water quality standards and consequently do not comply with state and federal laws. The forested ecosystems generate very little surface runoff. Rainfall intercepted by the tree canopy reduces the energy in raindrops hitting the ground, and subsequently the amount of soil erosion and sediment transported to the waterways. Tree roots take up much of the rainfall that reaches the ground, and the undisturbed soils provide infiltration and groundwater storage capacity to sustain stream flows through drier periods. The effects of urbanization on vulnerable wetlands and the amount of surface runoff from the landscape are significant. The graph in the lower right corner of this image is taken from the guidelines for erosion and sediment control in urban and suburban areas. It illustrates what happens to precipitation that falls on various types of land cover. The left-facing arrow represents the amount of rainfall that ends up as surface runoff. The two downward-facing arrows designate the amount of direct and indirect infiltration, and the upward-facing arrow illustrates the percent of rainfall that ends up as evapotranspiration. In undisturbed landscapes, less than 10% of the precipitation that falls on the ground results in stormwater runoff. The additional area of compacted and impervious surfaces associated with urbanization changes the hydrologic characteristics of the landscape. Simultaneous with an increase in the amount of impervious surfaces is the loss of headwater streams, vernal pools, and water supply recharge, and a subsequent increase in the volume of stormwater runoff and loss of infiltration. The effects of urbanization and corresponding loss of vulnerable wetlands can escalate impacts to water resources and the public interest protected under the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. For example, during periods of dry weather, the loss of vulnerable wetlands can contribute to reductions in groundwater recharge and drinking water supplies, reductions in stream flows, and the subsequent loss of aquatic habitat. Loss of vulnerable wetlands and the reduced infiltration capacity in the landscape can also exacerbate flood situations that are associated with intense rainfall events. It is critical for municipal planning to understand where the wetland resources are located and how to preserve these resources and their functions for the future and for the benefit of residents in the community. For additional information regarding vulnerable wetlands and using GIS maps for stormwater management planning, please contact Nancy Lynn or Alice Smith of the MassDEP Wetlands Program. Our email addresses are nancy.lynn@state.ma.us or alice.smith@state.ma.us. References and links for vulnerable wetlands presentations can be found on the MassDEP websites under Education and Outreach. Vulnerable Wetlands and Stormwater Management Planning presentation is funded in part by a federal Clean Water Act Wetland Program Development Grant from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Region 1.